Hey guys, Grace Life here. Today I'm going to be talking about the Airbnb trip that almost killed us twice. Alright, so let's get right into it. So it's Thanksgiving break, and long story short, our dorms were kicking us out because they don't want anybody staying in the dorms on Thanksgiving break because it takes up too much energy, apparently. We had to brainstorm like the week prior, where are we going to stay? In the meantime, when we're getting kicked out, we come up with the idea, me and my roommate, of Airbnb. But you know what? We're like broke college students, so we're like, okay, we got to find a place that's cheap. And so the cheapest place that we found happened to be a cabin all the way up in this place called Red Cliff, really close to the Rocky Mountains, pretty much. It was a cabin up in the mountains, and it was a 3.5-mile hike, at least what the description said, up this mountain, and that was our journey. So we go to our rec center the week prior to the trip, and we start running out gear that we need. So we got backpacking backpacks, avalanche beacon, shovels, canned food, water filter, sleeping bags, and we packed up a bunch of water bottles in our backpacks, and then a bunch of canned food as well. And so our first night at the cabin was on Saturday, and so we didn't have any place to stay Friday night because that was the night that they were kicking us out of the dorm. So our friend, let's just call him Joe, happened to be in the same predicament where his flight was leaving back to California from Colorado on Saturday morning, and he needed a place to stay on Friday too. So his dad ended up booking a hotel room for him, which was really cool because he ended up letting us crashing the night there. You know, I slept on the floor, my roommate slept on the couch, and another guy slept on the bed with Joe. And so everything was cool. Next morning we wake up, I take a shower, and we go straight down to the Jeep, start loading up our backpacks and gear into the Jeep. At this point, the Jeep is like super packed, so we're like, okay, we're ready. Let's just start driving there right now. It was a 4-hour drive from Fort Collins down to Red Cliff, which is where we were coming from. And so we finally get to Red Cliff at 2 p.m. And this is when the Jeep starts having a little bit trouble. There's a detour called Jeep Road, and basically that road led us a lot closer to the cabin than the trail that we were supposed to take. The original trail was going to be 4 miles long. However, if we took the Jeep Road, it was going to be 3.5 miles long. The only problem was that this road, or the trail more so say, was about 20 inches, 30 inches deep in snow, so it was extremely deep. We were driving a lifted Jeep, and the differential was like dragging on the snow, and so like we would drive up the mountain, and then our Jeep would eventually lose momentum, get stuck in the snow, and start sliding back. And so we were like, okay, we can't do this. So we kept on doing this until like 3 p.m., and at this point, I'm like, alright, today is not the day to hike. Today, it's too late because it gets dark at 5 p.m. It's winter, it gets cold at night, we need to spend the night in the Jeep. That was the only logical solution to this. So we pulled back down the Jeep off of Jeep Road because we were realizing we're not going to get on that. Go to the original trailhead, which was 4 miles long. And we park up there and we start setting up. So we take out our beers and a few sausages because we were hungry. And so we're having like a good time, you know, drinking 40-ounce beers, rolling up a couple blunts, you know what I mean? Like just chilling. So we think everything's good. Overnight, our feet get extremely cold. The Jeep gets so cold that our steam turns to frost on the windows of the Jeep. That's how cold this was. It was about maybe 10 degrees. But when you go outside and you look up at the stars, it was insane. Alright, so next morning we wake up 11 a.m. We're like, okay, we got all our gear packed. We're gonna start hiking now. So originally, we had a plan to snowboard there, so we basically brought our snowboarding gear, and we had like all our snowboarding gear in some sleds, and that was how we were planning on dragging up this mountain. Didn't work out too well. The first like not even 0.1 miles we start hiking up this mountain, basically our sleds like tipping all over the place, spilling all our shit, and we're just like, alright, we gotta leave our boards down here because we're not going anywhere with this shit. And now it's about 12 a.m. noon, and so like we put all the shit back in the Jeep and only carry our backpacks. And so like every 0.1 miles we'd be taking a break because this mountain was extremely steep, and every few steps, because you're hiking in snow, your feet would sink. The snowshoes that we had running didn't work out too well, so we didn't end up using them. So every few steps your feet would sink into the snow, and it would take like a lot of energy just to pull our legs out of it, because the backpacks we were carrying maybe weighed like 50 to 70 pounds. They were pretty heavy. 7 p.m. hits, and it's dark as shit. Everything's so cold. We have ice patches all over our clothes, and it's like there's a patch of ice everywhere on your clothes. For a second, we all just stop because I'm cramping up. We only had a beer because all our water froze that next morning because the Jeep was so cold. We only had beer and 2 sausages as our energy, and so we didn't have enough food or enough calories to burn for us to be doing that type of exercise. And so I was cramping up a lot, and at one point I stopped, and I told my roommate, I was just like, yo, you and Wong just need to keep on going because I'm holding you guys back. I'll just set up my hammock, my sleeping bag inside my hammock, and I'll sleep out the night, and I'll be completely safe. This was me thinking irrationally because my body was so tired. Like if I would have stayed out that night, I would have definitely died, but my roommate kept me going because he was like, listen, you're
being mentally weak right now.
And he was completely right, because everything to me is a mental game. You can keep your body pushing and doing what it wants to do as long as your head is in the right place. And so we're under this hill crest, and so I'm in the back of the line. My roommate's in the middle of the line, and then we got my friend Wong at the front of the line. I yell up to Wong, I'm like, hey, take off your backpack, go over that hill crest up there and see if you could see a cabin anywhere. He goes over this hill and he screams back, I see a cabin, I see a cabin. And so me and my roommate Rick get super excited, put on our backpacks, go over this mountain, and I look at this cabin and I'm like, shit, it's not our cabin. Our cabin has blue walls and is red. This was a brown cabin, okay, and that was already an immediate set off. So I walk up to this cabin and this thing has 3 walls. The 3rd wall was completely exposed, as you guys can see in the picture here. And so I started making the fire and I give the lighter fluid to Wong, and I don't know why, but this homie uses 2/3 of the lighter fluid bottle, and we have like 2 more nights here. And so like he uses it all on this wood that's like super alive, super frozen, and basically not gonna keep staying on fire. So he used 2/3 of that bottle, and I just get pissed because I'm like, dude, you just wasted all our lighter fluid. What the fuck are we gonna do? So I take this lighter fluid bottle, and out of like frustration, I take it on this little post on the 3rd wall where it was completely exposed, as you guys can see in the picture. There's this post that was connected to the cabin still. I sprayed the lighter fluid on this post, and I lit that on fire. It was dry wood. The cabin was all dry wood, so it stayed on fire. And so like while this thing was burning, everything was good. We put our feet next to the fire, started warming up a little bit, right? And then we get cozy. We're like, we're gonna sleep here. And in my head, I was thinking like, this whole cabin's probably gonna catch on fire, and I'm not gonna give a single shit because I'm gonna be warm. I was picturing all the walls on fire, the roof on fire, and the floor just like completely good, and I was okay with that, okay? Because this was how desperate we are. So basically, we set up our sleeping bags, and overnight, the cabin starts catching on fire in random places. The floor started catching on fire, the middle post started catching on fire, and I was in my mummy bag, so I couldn't see anything that was going on. It was literally, I had to keep my face covered because there was so much smoke in the air in such a confined space. And so like my roommate and Wong were waking up in the middle of the night every now and then, shoveling snow and popping it on places that were catching on fire that we didn't want to catch on fire. So at one point during the night, my sleeping bag caught on fire, and this was right after when I started praying. I'm not a religious person, but I started praying on this night because I was just so desperate. And right after I prayed, I just remember my feet in my sleeping bag getting extremely warm, and I was just like, oh my god, I don't know what this is, but this feels good. Like I thought it, like God just put his hands on my feet, and all of a sudden I'm just like, holy shit, this is amazing. And so I'm just thinking in my head, my roommate's feet were across from mine in his sleeping bag, and I was thinking in my head, he probably transfers, so I'm gonna lift up my feet right now and put my feet in my sleeping bag on top of my roommate's feet in his sleeping bag, and his feet will probably get warm too. It turns out my feet were getting so warm because the floor caught on fire and it caught my sleeping bag on fire. I lift up my feet, put it on my roommate's sleeping bag. 10 minutes later, the heat starts dying off my feet, and all of a sudden I feel my toes poking the outside world, and I'm like, oh shit, my sleeping bag was just on fire. Luckily it was made of synthetic material, so it put itself out. And so like my toes were touching the outside, and meanwhile this fire's still going inside the cabin, so we just got water dripping from the roof from the snow that's on top of it down on us, and these little drops were turning to patches of ice as they're settling on our gear. And so we wake up the next morning, half of our gear is burned, right? Like my sleeping bag is burned, my roommate's sleeping bag is burned, my roommate's shoes were burned, and then I go over to my roommate and I see his fingers. His fingers are just dark purple, and I start freaking out because I'm like, I have never been in this type of situation before where somebody could actually lose their fingers because of how cold it is. So I look at his hands and I'm like, oh shit, you gotta put something on that shit. So I give him my gloves, he puts those on, and he puts his hands in his jacket, starts warming it up. We couldn't make it to our cabin that night because my phone had died from the cold. When you're out in the cold basically drains your phone battery, so it could be from 50% straight down to 10% real quick. I was the only one with the map downloaded, so that's why we couldn't get to the cabin. Next morning I wake up, I look up the hill from the cabin where we're at, this shitty ass cabin, and I see blue and red, and I'm like, that's the way to the cabin. So we start hiking up this mountain. It was maybe like 0.2 miles away from us. We just couldn't see anything that night because everything was so cold, hectic. We had no energy, no food, no sleep. We were just not in the right situation to be there. We totally overpacked. On top of that, all our water froze, so we had frozen water bottles that we cannot drink from. It was just us smashing these bottles on rocks to get the ice to crack so we could drink it, and that was a pretty terrible time. So next day we make it up to the cabin. As you can see in the pictures, it's a pretty damn nice cabin. The view was not worth almost dying for, but it was definitely worth the hike, if that makes sense. We get over there, everything's all cool, right? And every few days we had like this little bird that would come visit us. Like, here's a video of it. So long story short, we end up spending 2 nights there, and then we start hiking back down. The hike down was about 2 hours long. Wasn't that bad. We hop in the Jeep, pack up all our gear, and then we start driving towards the exit. When we get to the exit, the road was fucking closed because we were there a day after winter access. And so basically I didn't have cell reception. Nobody had cell reception, so I had to hike. So I started hiking up the road, ended up hitchhiking with the cop, and this cop actually brought me to the nearest house, and the nearest house happened to be owned by this millionaire dude who did real estate, and I was like, holy fuck, this guy's balling. Like, he had off-grid solar panels, he had wells. His whole house was pretty much off-grid. It was a humongous house. He couldn't help us because the ranger wasn't picking up, who was in charge of the gate. And so, like, he ended up driving me back down to the gate with some food, like apples, granola bars, and some water. And our Airbnb host, let's call him Ben, okay, told us that the code for the cabin was 1939. And we put in the code on the cabin because the cabin has a padlock on it that locks you out, and we put the code in and it didn't end up working, so we just unscrewed the latch off the cabin. However, my roommate suggested that we try 1939 on the gate that was locked because it had a lock on it. Ben actually texted us 1938. That was the code he texted us. We would just have bad memories and thought it was 1939. So on this government-owned gate, we put in this code, and lo and behold, it unlocks, right? And we're just like, what
The fuck?
It's a 4-digit combination. It literally could have been anything, and it unlocked. And so we were just so thrilled, so happy. That's pretty much where the story ends, guys. We got out safe, and then we moved on to our next Airbnb, which happened to be the school bus, and that'll be in my next story. I almost died on that one too. Stay tuned, subscribe, comment, like, do whatever you want. Have a good day. Peace out.